Muy buenas tardes, muy buenas noches a todos y a todas. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos a una sesión más de CodeSwitch, Turning on Language Education Research. Este espacio denominado CodeSwitch tiene dos intenciones principales. La primera intención es hacer una invitación a salirnos quizás de nuestros roles típicos como docentes, investigadores, estudiantes y dedicar quizás un corto espacio a descubrir nuevas ideas y propuestas innovadoras dentro de nuestro campo disciplinar. La segunda intención de este espacio es, digámoslo, también hacer una especie de switch off, de un cambio, digamos, de la percepción de lo que supone la investigación dentro de la comunidad académica, en particular para estudiantes de pregrado. ¿Sí? ¿Qué significa la investigación, pero también qué ocurre en la medida en la que se investiga? ¿Y cuáles son esas pequeñas sorpresas y esos grandes descubrimientos que acontecen dentro de la actividad investigativa? For today's session, we have two special guests. Only one could make it for today, but that is all right. She's representing her colleague, Professor De Gunter. She's Professor Elsa Catalina Olivas Castellanos. She's coming from Universidad de Sonora in Mexico. And today she will be presenting some general aspects and overview, and of course some of the insights derived from her study in co-authorship with Professor De Gunter called Strategic Innovation, Conception of Innovation Among Social Sciences Researchers in Higher Education in Northwestern Mexico. En un contexto universitario en el cual siempre se hace un llamado a la innovación, ¿sí? A la innovación de carácter científica y tecnológica, sobre todo dadas unas demandas de internacionalización de las instituciones educativas ¿sí? de nivel superior de las universidades. ¿Cómo se entiende precisamente la noción de innovación? ¿Sí? ¿Cómo se conectan las nociones de políticas públicas alrededor de lo que son estas demandas que todos los días de alguna manera están presentes al interior de las instituciones, de las facultades, de los programas? ¿Sí? Hoy vamos a explorar un poco con la profesora, sí, Catalina, lo que esto ha significado y cómo de alguna manera estos elementos de alguna u otra forma se entrecruzan, ¿sí? Y cuáles son de pronto algunos de esos hallazgos que nacen, sí, en particular desde el contexto mexicano. Nos place un montón que esté aquí presente, que pueda compartir con nosotros y una grata sorpresa descubrir que ya había estado justo en esta ciudad, ¿verdad? Una muy grata coincidencia. Entonces es como decir bienvenida de regreso acá, profesora Catalina, y también pues por ahí derecho al profesor Hunter, mandarle un saludo allí donde esté. Nos place un montón tenerlos acá y adelante.
Pues bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación, profesor. Es un honor ser reconocida, ¿no? De manera internacional por las investigaciones que se están haciendo del otro lado del mundo, ¿no? Claramente. El doctor Leonel de Gunter y su servidora, pues les agradecemos la oportunidad a la universidad y especialmente al profesor Martínez. Como mencionaba, pues nuestro estudio, voy a compartir una slide aquí también, pues que me van a salir algunas palabritas en inglés también, porque pues el artículo está en inglés, ¿no? y, y bueno, hay veces en que se entiende mejor en inglés. Nosotros hicimos un estudio donde queríamos ver qué es innovación de acuerdo a los investigadores, ¿no? ¿Quiénes están investigando? ¿Qué están desarrollando en su campo, en este caso de las ciencias sociales? Y decidimos enfocarnos especialmente en aquellas instituciones de nuestro estado, el estado de Sonora, aquí al noroeste de México, las instituciones con mayor producción científica, ¿no? ¿Qué es para ellos innovación? Y obviamente pues indagar si en realidad lo que están haciendo es o no es innovación. Y decidimos entrevistar a investigadores de la institución que viene siendo el CIAL, Es el centro de investigación pública, pues uno de los más productivos aquí que tenemos en el estado. Si bien su concentración no es ciencias sociales, es más de ciencias de alimentos y químicos, pero sí tiene un departamento de ciencias sociales donde ahí ya está economía y está sociología. Con ellos nos dirigimos en ese aspecto, ¿no? Y en lo que viene siendo el Colegio de Sonora, nuestra segunda institución, ahí sí entrevistamos a los que vienen siendo los historiadores, economistas y los sociólogos, pero más que nada historiadores y sociólogos. El Colegio de Sonora también es una institución de un alto nivel de producción científica, que si bien dan cursos y posgrados de maestría, doctorado, su especialidad sí son las ciencias sociales. Y en nuestra tercera institución, lo que viene siendo la Universidad de Sonora, la universidad pública aquí del estado, pues más grande, también cuenta con sus investigadores. Nos enfocamos en las mismas áreas, ¿no? Para pues así comparar, ¿no? Por área, por disciplina y por institución, qué es para los que dicen estar innovando, qué es innovación. Se podría decir, esta pregunta surge a través de largas conversaciones y reflexiones que el doctor de Gunther y yo hemos tenido ya a lo largo de 4 años, ¿no? Del trabajo primero de tesis y luego al momento de estar armando pues lo que viene siendo el esqueleto de las preguntas. Hay muchas incógnitas que queríamos indagar y una de esas será precisamente la concepción de los investigadores acerca del concepto de innovación. Y pues hicimos todo un estudio cualitativo, entrevistamos a varios investigadores durante la pandemia, ¿no? Cosa que no pensamos que iba a ser nuestro caso. No era el contexto que queríamos, porque también queríamos hacer observaciones para tener mayor información de cómo realizaban su investigación, ¿no? Aparte de lo que ellos pensaban o tenían en mente que es innovación. Sin embargo, pues la pandemia llegó y movió todo, ¿no? Movió todo a las casas y a las computadoras. Y fue así que empezamos pues a indagar más acerca de las percepciones de estos investigadores acerca de su trabajo científico y de su innovación. Al analizar todas las respuestas, sí podríamos decir que la gran mayoría de los participantes de este estudio tienen ideas de lo que viene siendo innovación. Sin embargo, muchos dijeron que estaban innovando, pero no podían explicar precisamente cómo, de qué manera. Y sí hubo un porcentaje menor que sí nos pudo decir que en efecto no estaban innovando y comprendían que su trabajo científico pues era una continuación de una serie de trabajos que ya eran posteriores y seguían esa línea o esa tradición de línea de investigación, pero no estaban innovando. Eh, al hacer el estudio también uno empieza a darse cuenta un poco del hábitos, ¿no? De lo que viene siendo de los investigadores, porque ese era nuestro interés, ¿no? Saber qué opinaban o qué pensaban de la innovación, pero a través de las entrevistas, pues uno va armando una historia de cómo es el trabajo de investigación en instituciones de gran impacto en la comunidad científica, al menos en lo que viene siendo la región del noroeste, ¿no? Y recuerdo muy bien uno de los que podríamos decir que sí estaba innovando fue el que hizo la observación del idioma, ¿no? Ninguno de los otros investigadores aquí, en vez de Colciencias, ¿no? Es en Colombia. La institución es Colciencias, ¿sí? Ajá. Aquí en
Correcto,
México, pues tenemos,
conciencias, sí.
sí, aquí en México tenemos el Sistema Nacional de Investigadores, que también pues, tiene muchos criterios y limitaciones y restricciones para que uno pues entre al sistema y continúe en el sistema más precisamente, ¿no? Y aún así, de todos los que entrevistábamos eran parte de ese Sistema Nacional de Investigadores, no todos estaban claros en la idea de qué es la innovación. Este investigador precisamente hizo esa recomendación y dijo que para él le había servido innovar en otros países, leyendo otros papers en otros idiomas, y en específico el inglés, porque hay un estigma en muchos de los que están en la academia de, pues, voy a publicar en mi idioma, porque yo quiero contribuir en mi idioma, ¿no? Pero también, pues, las posibilidades para una cierta publicación se reducen aún más. Y quienes nos pueden leer, nunca nos van a leer si no nos adaptamos nosotros a lo que viene siendo este pues mundo global, ¿no? Donde uno necesita publicar en el idioma donde el área de interés está más vigente. Hay prácticas de producción científica que son muy exitosas y lo seguirán siendo, ¿no? Pero también tenemos que ver la realidad que eh, la adquisición de otro idioma sirve mucho para lo que viene siendo la investigación y la producción científica. Tomando en cuenta ese comentario, pues decidimos hacer el salto y atrevernos a escribir en inglés, ¿no? Eh, el, el artículo no estaba pensado en inglés. El documento que estábamos haciendo de la tesis, de donde sale este trabajo, pues es de una universidad pública mexicana, ¿no? Donde las clases son en español. Bien, se les pide a los alumnos al ingresar un cierto nivel de inglés, no para escribir, sino para comprender las lecturas de alto impacto que van a estar leyendo, ¿no? Durante sus estudios. Y aún así, pues decidimos escribirlo en inglés. Eh, la respuesta de la publicación ha sido muy favorable. Hemos podido expandir nuestra red de investigación científica, no nomás aquí, pues aquí ya en México, sino también con ustedes allá en Colombia y en otras partes del mundo, en Japón, en Netherlands próximamente, en Londres, y pues hay algunas otras que también ahí tenemos contacto con, ¿no? Yo creo que el idioma, en este caso, pues el CodeSwitch, que me sé una muy buena iniciativa. Sé que estoy hablando más español, but you let me know, and if you want, I can continue in English, but I believe that it has aided us into having a broader audience that really is looking into making these significant collaborations in the scientific community. Unfortunately, in some occasions and in some circles, the language it's not only a barrier, but it can be a limitation for many. So while we were thinking in English and writing this article, we understood that our audience is going to not necessarily know the context that we're describing, the Sistema Nacional de Investigadores, the limitations of funding, in these research centers. Nonetheless, the response has been very positive, and we continue to receive invitations such as the one that you made to us in order for us to share and even collaborate with them. I don't know if you have any other questions or if I'm okay.
Yeah, so far so good. I think yes, questions are present mainly in regard to always taking the initiative within let's say system structure that usually does not help a lot. That is, for example, our experience here in Pereira, in the university, that whenever we talked about research, whenever we talk about innovating, yeah, and 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 not only in terms of like the decisions we make, like using a different language for publishing and for discussing and for sharing, but also just the very basic formulation of a project encounters many different obstacles, that some of them are logistic, other are more like institutional in terms of what the departments require each program, each individual to do and to comply with. And usually that takes a lot of energy, yeah, and that takes a lot of time from the very same project that we want to propose or from the very same initiatives. So that is actually why one of the reasons what we wanted to invite you, because there is again this question, like we are trying to confront a system that usually demotivates the spirit of innovation. You know what I mean?
Okay,
That is
yes.
one of the things. So maybe the question is like in this exploration of strategic innovation, maybe there's something there that can be answered in regard to how can we be strategic within a system that it's very, asphyxiating sometimes.
Okay, very good, very good questions. And I think that they're complex to answer. For example, uh, we're not necessarily trying to confront a system, we're just putting out there how the system is. And the reader can make the assumption if it is a limiting system or it only constrains or pushes, because in the case of our study, each institution, the structure of it is very different, as I mentioned. One is a public university, the other is a research center, and the other one it's a public institution, but it is specifically centered to social sciences. So again, I think each system within the institutions have their good points and not necessarily constraining. In some occasions, they are limiting. But I think that we try to represent what is wrong with the general assumption of innovation. Because even though they are from different institutions, they are from the same field, meaning social sciences. So there should be a coherency, whether they are from Mexico, from Colombia, or from a university in the same city or state. There should be an actual coherency with innovation. In our perspective. So that makes a lot of noise to us, and they are participating in the same scientific community, in the same area of study, social sciences, but nonetheless, they differ, and some don't even know how to explain what is innovation. In a few cases, but we did have some participants that couldn't even answer a fully definition of self. And in regard to your second question, how can we answer or how can we propose, let's say, a strategic innovation? I believe that it depends on the team because, for example, well, I didn't do this by myself. I had the help of Dr. De Gunther Delgado, who has years of experience in this. And I think that he has an open mind. When I mentioned him, if we could write it in English, he was he was actually ready for the idea. And I think that not all of the researchers, as you mentioned, are open to, you know what, I'm going to go outside of my comfort zone, outside of my language and write, because reading is very different than writing in academia. Uh, but of course, Dr. De Gunther has experience in both languages, and I think that was a plus. Uh, and for example, what I can answer to that, how can we not necessarily confront the system, but have a strategic innovation, is finding the key partners to collaborate with. Okay, whether it be in the same institution, such as myself and Professor De Gunther, or across the country or across the world, where the distance isn't the barrier or the limitation, okay? But I think that a good team or a good pairing between researchers can be a strategic innovation, because you understand what the other is aiming for. If the other person wants to, I don't know, make an innovation, and that innovation translated into a patent, then I know what his actual goal is. But sometimes, as you mentioned, some systems are corrupt. uh, the the goal of research gets lost in translation, and the goal of innovating gets lost in published to or peers, right? That sense of urgency that you must produce because Conciencias needs you to produce, or you must produce because Sistema Nacional de Investigadores needs you to produce in order for you to continue being part of this scientific community. But as the same as in creativity, innovation and creativity go hand in hand. And for both to emerge, there has to be an environment between the researchers that is inviting of that, of designing ideas and creating processes that are not necessarily the traditional ones, but there is an understanding between the key actors that are involved in an idea, in a concept that of course becomes research, and then that becomes innovation, hopefully, and that becomes a publication or a patent, a patent. Okay, but I mean, I think that, I don't know if I answered the question or not.
Most definitely, and I think you're touching upon a very important point when we are talking about the pressure that we universities suffer from these other, let's say, state organisms such as Conciencias in our case to produce. So that creates kind of like a contradictory, let's say, tension between what the university does as a traditional institution in which knowledge is built, is reflected, is shared, is discussed, and where also knowledge is generated. But then when we are in this logic of constantly producing, then we are in a way failing in this other part of the university, which is, okay, are we really having the time to discuss what we just generated? Do we have time to make this of this research a series of courses or seminars for others? It seems it's like you publish,
Yes.
continue, publish, continue, publish, continue. So in a way, it's like this word innovation for many institutions has become kind of like a buzzword, you know, like 21st century
Yes,
skills.
completely agree.
Yes, or like, what's the name of this? sustainable development goals, and all these very big words that, of course, when you go and look at them, sound fantastic. Innovation, who doesn't want innovation? But then when you pay attention to the logic, the administrative logic, or the maybe the public management logic behind it, then you see that sometimes it's more about speed and about quantity, and not so much about the quality that is very proper of innovation in itself, right? Like innovation usually comes with something like an added value, something never before considered. But I don't know if we are talking here about maybe a perversion of the word innovation, something that might affect even the terms. I don't know what your take on that is.
Completely. Why that was the reason why we started to question, because you see it everywhere. It's like artificial intelligence, for example. AI this, AI that. And what is actually AI according to professors or students? Some even don't know that they are using it, and they are saying that they are against it. So there is like not a clear perception of the term. In the case of universities, I completely agree that in some cases they use it as a buzzword in order to generate, or whether it be more students, or I don't know, a proposal, as you mentioned. And the SDGs, I think that, well, the SDGs are not going anywhere until 2030, as we already know. Hopefully, we do reach some target goals. Of course, not all of them are going to be reached. But in the case of innovation, I do agree with you that there is this handling of the word so loosely, and producing of it so let's say, so low. So we wanted to really see what that participant was doing, what type of publications was he or she producing. And we only identified 2 actual innovations out of the all of the participants that we interviewed. And those 2 were actually one, because they were co-authors of the project that they were doing. So while talking with those 2 participants, we understood that some of our the positions that we had, that there has to be an environment to invite innovation, was actually true. These 2 participants were professor and student, just like me and Dr. Leonel de Vinto. And they understood what they wanted to create. They wanted to actually create an innovation. And what they had to do is literally go across the pond and go to the UK, here from Hermosillo to the UK, and meet with people that actually are doing innovation in economics. They interviewed and they proposed, let's say, a version of that innovation, contextualize it to Mexico, and successfully apply it here, which was a complete game changer in the economy of Mexico. And they continue to work together because they understand what their goals are. Their goals are not producing, their goals are generating and creating actual innovation. So I think that that yes, I mean, there has to be, I'm going to put a lot of emphasis here, that the synergy between the participants that really want to innovate has to be there. There has to be a climate for innovation. And I'm not only saying that, a lot of authors are also saying that the climate for innovation has to be present, whether it be provided by a university or provided inside of an office building where 2 or 3 people meet and discuss their ideas. It has to be present. There has to be a synergy and a comfortableness where, as you mentioned, the higher education institution wants you to produce, but it doesn't necessarily makes you to produce. One chooses to participate in the game of science and research or not. I mean, there are some universities that are stricter than others that you have in their classes that professors have to publish X amount of articles and attend X amount of conferences, whether it be in a year or in 2 years. But there are other institutions that do have innovation in their, let's say, in manual guide for professors, and they do encourage the research, but there is no necessarily consequence if you don't. So I think that those that really want to be part of the scientific community and innovate are going to innovate regardless of the, let's say, the plus of belonging to a conciencias or a SME, or they're going to receive an economic incentive or a symbolic incentive of recognition. They're going to produce innovation, whether there are these institutions or not. If it's not in higher education institutions, they're going to look for public funding, and or in the case of these two participants that I mentioned, they're going to look for the funding in another country and by a government of another country, as the way that they did. But yes, I think that it is true. I think Professor De Gunther always mentions to me, focus. When I try to do a lot and think a lot, the act of reflection is a must and should always be there. And again, we cannot, let's say, stop those that are producing to produce, and it shouldn't be in our power to stop them. And there's always going to be a new word or buzzword around. Right now it's AI, right? But again, I think that those that are willing to participate in the scientific community, research and development for new technologies are going to do so, even though there is no support or funding at the moment that they need it. Okay. But I think that would be my kind of answer. I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah. I mean, you're touching on a lot of points here, in particular when you were mentioning, that there is this kind of like sense of idealism. Yeah, and sometimes we say that these are fantasies, right? That we have colleagues to which we are synergic, and we have institutions that actually care for teaching us how to do research and not only expect us to do it. Yeah. And yeah, it makes me think in a way of maybe some of the basic necessary conditions that even are required for innovation to happen. I'm wondering, as you said, maybe a little bit contrary to the feeling that you are giving me here, in regard to it. Maybe it doesn't matter if the institution doesn't support you, you can still thrive and find the opportunity to do your research. But then my counter impression or question would be, but shouldn't we have at least some basic elemental conditions for even your love or interest of research can flower, can thrive, can bloom, can result into something that is meaningful for the discipline, for the programs, for the institution itself? Because I have sometimes the impression that maybe for us, I don't know if this happens in Mexico, but it is my impression that in Colombia, we have come to a point in which research and teaching have to be managed simultaneously, right? And in a very intensive way. It is not like if you are dedicating to research, then you have less academic, let's say, load. But no, it is not that. It is the case that you still keep the same load. Do you want to do research? Okay, research. So in terms of those maybe conditions that have to do maybe with cognitive performance, disposition, time that is needed to read, to explore, to write, to propose, to formulate projects. I don't know if this is one of those aspects constraining innovation to your mind, to your view. Are we maybe talking about some fundamental conditions that need to be fulfilled, or how do you see that?
Yes, I agree. In a perfect world, universities would provide all of the physical spaces and material and tools and workshops for people to learn, okay, not necessarily research, because I think that we shouldn't ask professors to do research just to do research. As I mentioned, it's the passion of research that keeps them there. The ones that are still there without necessarily incentives or that are innovating, of course, it's a plus if you are part of a highly renowned system, such as Ciencias. But I mean, the lack of funding that there is nationwide, at least here in Mexico, and it will continue with this new law that just was approved 2 days ago, I believe, by the president, where funding will be reduced. I mean, even though it was already reduced, it will be keeping the quantity of money towards research and development less than 1% of GDP. I mean, we've had 0.47, 67, and it's below what is expected, okay, of a country to invest for research and development. And that's been happening for years now. So I think that, again, if our institutions are not providing that, we should, as let's say, connectors, make some type of collaboration or start knocking on the doors of Ivy League schools around the world where they are willing to listen to this crazy idea from a person from Mexico or from Colombia, that they have something to bring to the table and they understand the value of creativity. And through creativity, there comes innovation, research, technology. So they are going to, or will be willing to fund the ideas of people from other places in the world. That's what happens normally. I think that also in your country, those that excel in a specific field are offered high-ranking positions in other universities such as Harvard, MIT, and the talent of the country, well, goes towards those universities, right? And for the second question regarding research and teaching and done at the same time, it's a balance that in some cases, I don't even know how they are coming up with these publications, because some of the participants that we interviewed had full time as professor, even though they were researchers. Again, that depends on the institution, because in some cases you can have 1 or 2 sessions a week, and the rest of the week you produce and you research. And in other institutions, you have to give classes from Monday to Friday, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., and then see if you have time and energy to produce. But again, those that continue to do both at a high intensity, they decide if they want to continue. It shouldn't be that way, but there are a lot of factors involved, whether it be they have families to provide and the amount of wage that they receive as a professor isn't enough. So they have to be part of a system that gives them that economic incentive, plus they continue researching. But that's just one of many factors that I could mention. But there are cases that are successful. So there is something to the madness of those that produce a lot and teach at a very high level or volume of classes. In my case, I am a professor, not at the University of Sonora. I'm here at Tecnológica in Monterrey. I'm a professor. In the morning, I only have 2 sessions by choice because I understand that it takes a lot of time and energy to read and read, read and read and read and read and analyze and write. So I'm inclining myself more towards research. And I think for up till now, that is my goal to continue being in the academia and as a professor, but reducing my role as a professor and looking at education from another perspective of that of a researcher. But again, it's difficult. It shouldn't be that way, but each institution is different. The ones that I'm at do value research, do give funding for research, and I think that it is one of the few institutions in Mexico that really is aiming for research. Now, the objective of that research, I cannot tell you that it is for innovating or for ranking, okay? Because also you have that world ranking universities. But from my perspective, they really are encouraging professors to go beyond the classroom, and whether it be obtain a master's degree, a doctorate, or start having workshops and courses so that they can understand what they are teaching from the perspective of research. Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to have classes. That's why, precisely why Dr. De Gunther couldn't be here. He had sessions all day long and he is in committees. And I mean, I don't know how he does it. Sometimes I read messages from him at 11, 12, 1 a.m. Because it is very demanding. Academia is demanding. And the scientific community, I think, is even more. So it is up to us to see and say if we want to continue playing the game, grab some strategic practices that can aid us in our trajectory as researchers or as professors, and continue gaining the capital that we need in order for us to not only produce, but generate innovation. So I think that would be my answer to some of the questions that you put.
Yeah. I think that is a very nice way of approximating a closure of the session, like this willingness that also exists behind innovation, that is the willingness of the researcher himself or herself. That is a very important factor. That is let's say, a factor that, well, it's transcendental in a way that without it, well, you practically wouldn't have that ongoing ongoing process of generating, producing, or publishing, of embracing the scientific endeavor of building upon the things that have been built. In this context, Professor, I know maybe we could close with some final insights based on the research study that you two conducted. Maybe are there a couple of insights into these maybe new conceptions? Are we talking maybe here about how we should be conceiving innovation, or is only maybe an exploratory panorama? So this is how innovation has been conceived, or maybe we can maybe discover some patterns and say maybe this is the way we should go. Maybe we could try this. Maybe some final insights in that aspect, in that regard.
Well, yes, as many other studies, there should be further studies because we only are talking about a small amount of participants from three higher education institutions. We are not generalizing whatsoever that this is the conception of all researchers in regards to innovation. But we do mention that there should be. We don't necessarily promote a definition. There is one from the OECD that only one researcher knew by heart. Literally, he recited it because he understands that we are not in research in our institution. We are in research inside of the global scientific community. So in order for me to be read and understood by a researcher in South Korea, I had to stick by those, let's say, formalities that organisms such as the UNESCO, the United Nations, the World Bank, the OECD have established as a global understanding of what is innovation. We never mentioned that they should follow that specific definition, but we still are, let's say, in awe of how is this possible? I mean, not even in the same department, they have that coherency. And well, we saw why it is possible, because in most cases, researchers work alone, okay? And they work also, whether it be because their area expertise is very limiting and very precise, that there's not as many researchers willing to collaborate you in that specific field because it's too specialized, or because it's a competition at the end of the day for many researchers to be first author. Okay, that first author is like the prize cow for many. So we did sense that there is some sort of competition between most of the participants in that field of area, where again, each one has their specific definition, concept, research lines, and they do not communicate, not even with the researchers that are in the same city with them. So I think that we cannot force anybody to be more, let's say, willing to share what they are researching with, but we do encourage others to have contact with people that are interested in what you are publishing, so that we can agree to disagree, maybe, but share ideas and connect, such as we are doing right now. Okay. And I mean, it's from Colombia to Mexico. It's a long way. I don't remember how many hours it was on the flight. Beautiful country. I loved it. I want to go back. maybe next year, this year, I don't know. But sometimes, well, research goes beyond borders, and I would close it by saying that we just want people to have a coherence, okay? Whether it be in a field, in an institution, so that by that principle, you can achieve the next one, which is creating or collaborating in a team, and then producing or generation innovation, not necessarily the innovation that the mankind is looking for, but a specific innovation, whether it be an idea, a process, that can be implemented in that specific field. And I would close with that.
Thank you very much, Professor. Most definitely, I think a very innovative thing to do in this moment is to think about and discuss innovation. And I think in a way you have given us here a very generous and quick glimpse into what that means in our context. Highly appreciate your participation in this space. It is beginning, it is starting, maybe it would become also an innovative space in which other things can be explored. We are definitely very, very honored to welcome you here. And very pleased to know that you had already been here, so
Yeah.
it feels closer in a way. So, well, if that's the closure, so I want to thank the audience for following us today in this CodeSwitch session. This will be the last session of the month. Very soon, probably in 1 week, we'll be announcing the calendar for the ones that will take place in the month of May. Very appreciative of those of you who watched through the stream. And yeah, that would be it. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias por la invitación y un saludo allá a Colombia.
Ok, que esté muy bien. Hasta luego.
Bueno, bye.